Hey everybody, welcome to React Wednesdays. My name is TJ Van Tol. I work as a developer advocate at Blues Wireless. And if you're new here, again, welcome. React Wednesdays is a stream we do every Wednesday, as the name sort of implies, where we bring in cool people from around the React, from around the JavaScript world. We bring them in, we have them show us something cool. We try to learn something together. And speaking of that, I'm going to go ahead and paste in the site into the chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll find this in the show notes. Our site has a calendar where you can see upcoming shows that we're doing. You can add it to your calendar if you like reminders and that sort of thing. We are going to be taking a little bit of a holiday break, so this is our last show for a few weeks, but we've got a really cool guest coming after the holidays. Kent Dodds will be joining us to talk about Remix on January 5th, it looks like. So we'll be kicking off the new year with a bang. And we're working on scheduling new episodes after that. So again, check out telerik.com/React-Wednesdays if you want to add these things to your calendar and check those out. Cool. And today, though, we are talking to, and I'm going to go ahead and bring them in here, Paul and Jordan from Team Sapling. Paul, Jordan, welcome.
Hey, TJ. How's it going?
It's going good. Why don't you start by telling me who you are, what you do, that sort of thing. And maybe, Jordan, we could start with you.
Sure. I'm Jordan. I'm a software engineer at Codesmith. I do some lecturing and some mentoring and also some kind of odd job tasks on the code base.
Cool. And Paul?
Great. I'm Paul. I'm a software engineer as well. I'm currently applying for I'm living in LA. I'm originally from Scotland. I don't know if you can tell from my accent. And I'm currently waiting for my green card to come through, and then I'm going to be jumping into a role at a company. So just waiting for that.
Yeah, very cool. Scottish in LA. That is a very fun combination.
Yeah. It's a long flight, but it's worth it. It's worth it for the weather. Definitely this time of year.
Well, cool. Well, you have built what I think is a kind of a fascinating VS Code extension. It kind of blew my mind the first time I saw it, which is why I reached out. So I'm going to let you describe, what it is. And I'm also curious, like the inspiration behind it, like what made you want to build it as well.
Sure. Do you want me to give this a shot, Jordan? I'll try. Explain.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, Sapling is a VS Code extension that myself, Jordan, and two other collaborators, Charles Gutworth and Lindsay Baird, all built together. And what it does is it's a VS Code extension that we've built that's aimed at React developers to try and make their lives easier. So when you have the extension started up, you give it a file that is part of your React application, and Sapling will parse that file and all of its child component files if it is importing any and rendering any. And then it builds a hierarchy in the VS Code sidebar, showing you the sort of structure of your component tree, but also giving you an interactive way to navigate your file system following that tree, so you can open the different files that form part of your React application through the sidebar. So it's really just aimed at making React developers' lives hopefully easier, and that's why we're sort of hoping to get as much feedback as possible on it. What can we improve about it? What is making your lives easier? What could be added and things like that.
Yeah. No, I was intrigued by it because I think anybody who's worked on a non-trivial React application has dealt with folder structure hell of some variety. I know I certainly have. And there's tons of like guides online for like the best way to structure your React apps, and everybody has different opinions on that. And there's different ways of doing it. And what I like about the paradigm you've come up with is like you're using like what is actually rendered, right? Like, because that's like the ultimate source of truth. Because usually when you're developing, at least it seems to me, is like that's the path that your brain works. You're like, okay, well, this is here, and let me visually see what comes up the tree, I guess, follow my parents up the tree. So I really like the approach. I am curious, like the background behind it. What was the driving force to create this? Were you just really frustrated at working in huge apps? I'm just kind of curious.
Jordan, do you want to?
I think we were just looking for something to build. We were looking for a challenge, and we kind of asked around and thought, and like talk to other people about what they would really value in their day-to-day life. And we kind of like brought together this idea of a way to make the like you said, the whole file system navigation thing much better, much easier.
Where did the name come from, Sapling?
That was actually Charles's idea, and we're bummed that he can't be here today. But he said that he was just thinking of like trees and growing trees and that kind of thing, right? Right, Paul? Was that it?
Yeah, that was just that it was just something to do with a tree and the fact that we would be growing this tree, and that it seemed really fitting. And the minute he said that name to us, we were all on board. We were like, "Yep, that's perfect. Let's go with that." It just seems
I like it. That's good enough for me. Well, I definitely have some like technical questions here, but maybe we could start by just seeing the extension in action, because I'm just kind of curious to see how it looks, and then maybe we can dive into what's going on under the hood. And Jordan, I can go ahead and bring your screen up here.
Okay. All right. So if everybody's looking at my VS Code, this is its quiz wall. It is not ours. It's a quiz app that is open source on GitHub that we have been using for demonstrations and stuff. And it has a fair amount of files. Got all these components in here. And it's also got a bunch of containers and things like that. And there are even more. So it's kind of difficult to tell based on looking at the file explorer here, the relationships between all of these. So instead, we can go to Sapling and choose the file, which is somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious too. Did you find like the random repo just online exploring? Because I think this is an excellent like case in point of just a mishmash component.
Yeah, we actually I think I found a Stack Overflow that listed repos that were built for like testing, things like that, and this one was listed in there. So if you're like me and you can't find the root file of your application, you can instead right-click on it in your file explorer and press Generate Tree here. Sapling will open, and all of your components will show up. Each of these will show the props available on each component, and will also tell you whether or not you're connected to the Redux store. If you've got a node rendered in red, that means that there's something wrong. There's either an error in your file, a syntax error, or a problem with the import statement, and we couldn't find the file. So we make sure that you know that. And then we press this arrow button to open the file. And it's got some convenient kind of settings. Let me find a good one to demonstrate it on. Maybe I'll go to this one instead. So let's take share dialog here. Can comment out share dialog and watch it over here. We save, it disappears automatically. And I can bring it back, and it's very nice.
This is very cool.
Thank you. If you do want to reopen your tree at the file that you're currently looking at, then we added a status button at the bottom right-hand corner called Build Tree that will do that for you. Just click on it and it does it. We also made sure to add in where's the settings? So you might not want to view React Router or third-party components because you don't necessarily have access to the source code and you won't be playing around in them anyway. So if you want to not view those, then you can turn them off. And all of these things like card title and things are all designated as third-party components. So if you don't want to be viewing those, then you don't have to.
I have a few questions. Chad also wants to know, does the extension work with TypeScript, TS, and TSX files?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So my question is, first of all, how the heck does this happen? Because, right, like, so, okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking in my brain, like if I were approached with this problem, because you're fed, when you build the tree, you're fed one component. So you have to be just doing like some text parsing, presumably, on this. Like, I'm curious, maybe you could walk me through like high level what you're doing to make this possible.
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely look at it in more detail later on if you would like. But when to try and give you the overall flow, and when we were trying to develop this, we were trying to first check that no one else had ever already done this, and second look at what is out there that will give us some clues as to if this is even possible. And we should mention that there is a cool package you can find on NPM called React Component Hierarchy. This was like a command line tool that lets you build, that visualizes a tree structure of your of your React application. And so we took a lot of inspiration from that when we were trying to figure out a way that we could do this kind of parsing in order to make sapling possible. So in the simplest way, what sapling does when you hand it a file is it first of all parses that file using Babel parser and generates the abstract syntax tree from that. Once we've got that, we do a lot of extra parsing of the syntax tree, and we look at the imports that are being brought into that file. Once we know those imports, we have an idea of, okay, these are the files that are being brought inside this file. Then we actually look for JSX tags inside the file, and we see if those JSX tags are invoking something that's been imported at the top of the file. And if it is, we know, okay, we need to parse one level deeper then. So we add that to our list of like files that we need to parse. And as we do this, we basically build up a big tree structure of, here's your root component. It has children. Each of its own children are a tree node. And we just keep going until we create this possibly horrendous, massive big tree in the sidebar. But yeah, so that's
recursion in action, right? You get to bust out recursion. That's always fun.
Yeah. Jordan is a master of recursion, and it was we have this crazy like recursive function that gets called to parse the files and the children and the children and the children.
Master of recursion, and you got to get that in your Twitter bio. I think that's or get it on a plaque or something, because that's really fun. It's really cool because to me, like the easy part seems like if something has like a render function or a very straightforward return, it's like, okay, but lots of times JSX files can be complicated, right? Like you can condition, like, how do you handle like conditional rendering of stuff? I'm curious what that would be visualized like.
So at the moment, we don't handle conditional rendering. What we're not, because there are tools like you mentioned at the start that are available, which run as your app is already running and actually visualizes literally the components that are available at, that are instantiated at any time. Things like, React Dev Tools and things like that, you see that. Yep. Ours is much more like file system based. So it's much more like when you're developing, I need to know where I am possibly invoking this component, even if it's not being invoked all the time. So we don't actually, at the moment at least, consider conditional rendering at all. We just say, hey, this is one component, and under certain circumstances, it will render all of these components so that you can figure out where those components could be rendered inside your application.
That's another reason that if we have something like you invoke an outer component inside whatever component that you've defined, and then an inner component, technically in the React hierarchy, that inner component is a child of the outer component, but in our tree, they're siblings because they're all called in the same file.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense to me too, because it's kind of like you got at it. It's like different tools for different jobs, right? Like sometimes if you're in the browser, you want an actual, like this is what's actually at runtime here, but this is like an IDE convenience sort of thing, and it would be weird, like you wouldn't really want like like I could picture you could like conditionally put in your little tree hierarchy, but that would just be weird. I think you just want to see your straightforward case of like, what's my relationship between my files and my components that I'm putting in here. So this is pretty slick.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when we were building it, it was really a case of, we had worked on other React apps, and sometimes you would just get handed a React app and you're trying to understand what's going on, and maybe you're inside one component and you're like, okay, this is cool. I sort of understand what this component does, but it's being handed all these props, and I don't actually know which component or components are invoking this component. Like which is the parent of this component I'm currently looking at. And we hope at least that React developers might like to be able to just see that quickly in the sidebar when they're going through their applications. Oh, I can just go straight up to the parent and not having to dive through whatever folder structure I've decided to build for my app when I've been building it, or when someone else has been building it that maybe you don't understand. So that was sort of a big motivator for when we were building this.
Cool. I'm curious too, have you run across any like what are some of the more fun like edge cases you've ran into for like some of the weird things that people do? Because I'm also curious, like like the developer me would just be fascinated by running this in like some bigger like code bases, just straight curiosity, right? To see what happens. So I'm curious some of the craziness you've seen out there.
I like to describe this project as all edges, like the brownie tin.
Yeah, it's a really good description for it. I don't know if it's React as such or more to do with JavaScript, but there are so many edge cases. There's so many different ways people structure their files. There's so many different ways people structure their projects. You've got all these different ways of doing import and export syntax. And, we would definitely say that Sapling as it stands doesn't cover every single case. It covers the cases that we saw most commonly when we've been building, React applications, but there's a lot more out there. We have some issues on the GitHub that we're looking into to try and resolve, because there's things like, some people love to have in their larger React applications things like TypeScript config aliasing or Webpack aliasing of imports, and all of a sudden we can't just naively take the import path to try and find the file. We need to sort of reconcile that with a separate file that has all these. So there's edge cases that we know we don't handle yet, and we're still trying to add to that. We have got some work in the dev branch of Sapling at the moment that has some of these changes. We're starting to bring in the ability to handle some of these features, and maybe we could show that off a bit later. But yeah, we're that's still in sort of beta testing to make sure it doesn't break anything until we actually release it.
So you also have specific handling here, but for both React Router and then also Redux. Could you maybe explain like in a little bit of detail? I'm curious, maybe we could start with React Router, and I'm wondering too for some background. I know one difficulty I've had with using like the DevTools version of this is DevTools tends to put in a lot of these like components that React is making for me under the hood. So that's actually why I kind of prefer this visualization, because when I use the React one, it's like I know React decently, but I'm no like advanced React ninja or whatever. So I look at these things, it's like, okay, I don't really know what these levels of providers and routing components and stuff are. So I don't know, this is a rambling question, but maybe we could start by just saying, like, what does the React Router sort of preference do here?
I think that was mostly inspired by we saw a difference between React Router components and other third-party components in the way that they interact with the rest of your components. we thought that if you might not want to see all of your, I don't know, like the card title ones that are just the end of their branch. But if you have some kind of complicated routing, then you may want to know that routing is happening in that file. So then it would be convenient to show the React router components being invoked there.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. Maybe we could talk a bit about Reduxes as well, like how that because I'm also curious how you figure out the Redux bits of this as well.
So the Redux detection, I suppose you could call it, is it's quite simple at the moment, and it's something that I'd love to go back to and like boost up a bit. But like what we really like to do when we've been building Sapling is get example apps like It's Quizwall and like some other ones that we've used, and just test them. And then if it doesn't work, we add a new test to our test suite, and we add code to the parser until it passes it. So in terms of Redux for detecting it, at the moment we're detecting if in the file that we are parsing, the export default uses the connect function from React Redux.
Okay.
And it has we're presuming at that point that you're passing the component into that, and then we're saying that that component is connected to the Redux store. It's not perfect. There's probably cases where that wouldn't do what the user would expect, but it works enough on the things we've tested it on so far, basically.
Cool.
But we want to keep, as I keep saying, we want to keep adding to this as we go, make it more robust, more able to parse more things.
We don't want to. Sorry, we don't want to like clutter the UI here, but we were thinking of adding things like the state and dispatch objects, so that you can know exactly which state is being brought in at those components. But like that's something we're considering.
Maybe we could. I'm also very curious about. I've never built a VS Code extension. I would wager to bet that most of the people in chat and watching this on YouTube haven't either. Maybe you could just start by like, what is a VS? Like, I'd be curious of the absolute basics, right? Like, if I wanted to build a VS Code extension, like maybe you give me like the short 101 of what that involves doing.
Do you want to go for that one, Jordan? Or?
Sure. So the VS Code has an API that for building extensions, there are a lot of demos there. There's like one where you can make a cat type. It shows a picture of a cat typing at a computer or something. So there's a lot of documentation in there, and we just did a lot of reading at the beginning of when we were beginning to work on this. There's a lot of, I want to say a lot of boilerplate code, but there's definitely stuff that we had to learn about the specific messaging system and the workspace state and things like that. You have more to add, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, for the basic level, which we didn't know about until we looked at it. VS Code is an Electron app at its heart, so it runs Node, and our VS Code extension is a Node application, and it gets more complicated. There is quite a lot to the VS Code extension API. It's very powerful. You can do a lot with it, but what you're able to do is build the extension part of it, which when we discuss it, we sort of visualize this as like being the back end of like the server side of a client server model, the extension itself. But you can attach that you can attach that server or that back end to a web view, which is what you actually see in the sidebar panel there. That's actually a full React application itself that is in that sidebar view. And so we have a Webpack extension for the backend, and that pushes some HTML into an iframe in the front end web view, which renders a Webpack React application, which actually shows our component tree. So if you're into React, you'll love our front end basically, because it is a React application in itself.
Well, since we've been talking about recursion, I think I have to ask, can you run your extension on the React app that is the extension?
Yes, we can. And we had, there were some fun edge cases there because our parser is recursive, and also our React app uses like recursion. And so it would get stuck in an infinite loop. The parser would get stuck in an infinite loop while it was trying to parse our app. So we had to do some, make some design decisions about how to display when, two things are going to render each other forever.
Yeah.
And I think we found a pretty nice way of doing it. Do you want me to show I have to find it.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I'm also curious too, like the project is open source as well, like
yes,
up on GitHub.
Yes.
Do you mind if I stop sharing for a moment while I try to find it?
Yeah, go find it. We'll take your screen down and you can find it too. So it's up on GitHub. It's our contributors welcome if they're interested to hop in and stuff as well.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We recently had quite a big pull request onto our development branch from a collaborator, and which was really great, and we're going to be bringing that into the dev branch, and then hopefully once we have a couple of these other features, we might release a new version with some new enhanced version of Sapling that can handle a little bit more in terms of edge cases. So yeah, definitely, if anyone wants to come and have a look and contribute, please do so.
And it's OS labs-beta/sapling. Do I have the right one?
Yes,
yeah.
That's got a big green tree on the README.
Yep, I just threw it in the chat if you want to check it out. And Jordan, you want me to pop your screen back up?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
All right, should be good.
Okay. So actually remind me, Paul, it's sidebar.tsx that is the top one, right?
In terms of the web view.
Yeah.
That is like the topmost. That's our topmost component in the in our web view.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Here is where we are rendering the tree component, and then it renders a tree node component, which itself renders tree. And so we just decided that we're only going to show the loop once. And then hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, the way we handle that on the back end is we had to add to our tree data structure a parent list, a list of parents.
Yeah.
And as we go, we add to that. And if we're ever about to parse a file that we see in the parent list, we immediately stop us hitting like horrible issues. So yeah, we had once we realized that we couldn't parse our own React app, we felt really bad, and we had to like add in the ability to handle that edge case. So that is covered at least at the moment.
Very cool. This is pretty interesting. But Paul was just about to show us the developer version, some of the things that are upcoming into Sapling. So Paul, I will toss things back over to you. Maybe we could just take it from the top of some of the things that are coming.
Sure. Yeah. So this is the developer version of Sapling. We're adding some stuff to it. And when we are developing this, we run the development version in this sort of extension development host, which VS Code lets you have for their extensions. And so this is, when I click on Sapling now, it's not the version that you can get from the VS Code extension store. It's our little private version. So this is, some of the things that we're trying to add in at the moment are just, improvements to the UI. So having these sort of expandable menus in the sidebar, so that you can, if you set your Sapling settings up how you like them, you don't need to look at them anymore, hopefully. So you can just hide them away and have the tree view exactly as you would like it. So that's just small sort of UI updates. But the main things, as we discussed earlier, is just trying to make it work in more cases, cover more edge cases. So this was something that was brought to our attention, was that Sapling doesn't work if the user has an application which uses TypeScript config aliasing or Webpack config aliasing, and so that's something that we've spent a bit of time trying to make work here.
So I think, what is TypeScript config aliasing? Maybe a dumb question, but
yeah. So let's have a look at that. So this is an open source application from GitHub. It's called TakeNote, I believe. It's a cool note taking app, and it uses TS. What might be called TypeScript config aliasing, but it also has a Webpack setup that allows you to do the aliasing through Webpack as well. So to give you an example of that, that's when, for example, you would go into your TypeScript config file, and hopefully we can see this section here. You basically set up a thing that says, hey, when you're doing import paths, I want the @ whatever root to be replaced with ./source/client/star root. And similarly, they've got an alias for an @resources/star root, replacing with a different import path. So that's an example of what it seems to be fairly common if people are using tsconfig or TypeScript or a Webpack, that maybe you don't want to continuously have to keep typing out like ./source/client every time you want to import a file.
Yeah.
So put in an @ symbol and make your life a bit easier, but then make Sapling's life a bit harder.
Well, I learned something new about TypeScript in any case, because I had no idea this was even. I've worked in TypeScript apps. I didn't even know you could do this. Do you have to use the @ sign? Is that does that at least save you a little bit, or no? Is it going to be anything?
You can have anything there, as far as I can tell. You can, @ is useful because it's a single character to replace a lot of characters. But you can have, as far as I'm aware, you can have anything in there. So yeah, we can't just look for an @ symbol and go, oh, maybe they're using an alias. Like you just said, we didn't know anything about this until someone said, hey, it doesn't work on my application. And we looked at their imports and went, wait, how are they even importing these? What does that mean? So it's always a learning experience, right? And similarly, you can have this aliasing in the Webpack file. This isn't actually the full Webpack config for this application. This is just a simplified version, but it looks something like this in a Webpack file to do something similar, where you replace an @ symbol with an absolute path, for example. And it means that when you look at the components in this project, for example, let's see if I can find a good one of this. Try app. Let's see if that looks good. These import paths all start with an @ symbol, because they're using their aliases, and so Sapling wouldn't work on these because it just didn't know where to look for these files. Like, where is the app folder in your directory? It doesn't exist, so it would just fail. And so with a project like this, let me reset. All the settings here. Under the old version of Sapling, if we tried to parse this app, which has a lot of components in it, we wouldn't get very far. It would only show this because it can't find the files.
Yeah.
But now, fingers crossed, demo of beta version of a thing here. But if we give it the root directory where all of its files are contained, and we give it some information about the aliases by selecting the tsconfig file itself, and we parse out the tsconfig file, now this works, and we can see. I can close these little drop downs so that we get more room here. Now we can see the full application, and just like Jordan showed at the start, all the normal Sapling functionality works. So we can we can specifically open a file from the view. If we go into this file and we comment out something and save it, that disappears. And if we comment it back in the helmet component, it comes back, and things like that. So that's something that we still need to test it further to make sure we've not introduced any bugs through this. But that's something that we're hopeful to have out pretty soon.
Yeah, you answered one of my questions, which was going to be, how do you find these config files? But it sounds like you just have people provide it, because I think that's the only option, right? Because I believe you can like name those different things and put them in different places. So
exactly, yeah, we really need we need a little bit of help here for some of these things. Like it's hard because with these dev tools, our aim is to make them as easy to use as possible, because if it takes you 20 minutes to configure it at the start before you can use it, that's going to put a lot of people off using it right away. We want it to work as much as possible out of the box. But for some things, we just do need some help to get it working. In terms of other cases we'd like to cover one big thing that we have in terms of issues on our GitHub is, and I'm not sure the best term for it. Some people call them these barrel import files or index import files, where you essentially have, a folder full of components, and in that folder you have an index.js file.
Yeah.
That imports all of the things in that folder and exports all of them. That's an edge case that we don't currently cover at Sapling, because we're not currently looking for that index file, and even if we found that index file, we've not got something set up to parse it properly yet. But that's something we would love to have working in the future, because that seems fairly common as well in these larger React applications.
Yeah, the other edge case that came to mind is it either like dynamic imports or like I think the newest version of Next allows you to like import from URLs. sort of thing as well. I imagine though, like it's kind of, this sounds like a fun project to work on, because like if you're into like trying to solve like mysteries of crazy things, I imagine some of these debugging sessions are like simultaneously awful but also very satisfying when you kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah, it's a lot of like algorithms understanding, and like how do we sometimes, especially because the AST that you generate from these files is quite a massive data structure, it's sometimes a lot about how do we traverse this properly and find the bits of information that we need to understand in order to know what we're looking at here and add it to the tree in the right way. And yeah, there's room for so much more to be added to this. We only currently look at Redux as a state management sort of solution, but there's way more ones out there that could be, so there's a lot of room for growth here, which is quite cool. And yeah, the problem solving, the bug debugging can be quite hard, especially because sometimes the VS Code, because this is running inside VS Code, it doesn't work exactly as you would expect all the time. From if you're used to developing a normal Node app, sometimes you're not allowed to do certain things just because it's in an extension and it's running on someone else's computer, so it doesn't want you to randomly run a JavaScript file somewhere else on their file system that they've not asked you to run, for example. But it's been great, and yeah, we're hoping to keep adding to it.
Well, cool. I'm going to put out a last call. If you have any questions you want to run by Jordan and Paul, please put them in. And I'll ask you too, like, is there anything we've missed so far that you want to talk about, any features? And if not, I like to end with what I like to call like a link dump, right? Like if people are interested, where should they go, right? How to follow you, how to follow the project, the open source. Like if you want to just dump them into like either here or the private chat, we can make sure people know where to go if they're interested.
Sure. Yeah, let's grab some of the links.
Because if people want to install it, it's just as simple as going into the extensions view in VS Code, right? And typing it in.
Yeah, if you just go to extensions, type in Sapling, you should see a picture of a green tree. And yeah, just click install, and it, fingers crossed,
Got our
does what
website
you need it.
here.
Yes. All right. So I'm going to toss in a link to the extension, but you can get that just in VS Code, and I'll put in the website as well. And I see you have a Twitter account as well. Should I drop that in there too? Is that someplace if people want like updates on things? Should I list that as well?
It's not something that we use very regularly, I would say, but if we have
Okay.
a big major version, it will be there. But if they have it installed, when the new version releases, I think actually VS Code will automatically update you to the newest version, without you having to do anything. But I also think you can probably roll back to a previous version if we break something. Hopefully we won't break something, but
I can tell you for a fact you can roll back, because I have another story that's not your extension about the time that I needed to do that just last week. So you can roll back. I discovered actually one of Microsoft's official extensions just pushed out a broken version, and there's a way if you go into the extension you can go back. But like you said,
Right.
hopefully totally unnecessary here.
That's good to know, just in case.
Yeah,
because it's surprisingly easy to when you're publishing the extension and sending it up to the extension store, you just type in like package and then a couple of extra commands. So you just type in publish and a couple of extra commands, and that releases a new version onto the store with whatever is in your on your VS Code at the time. But if you want to just create a local version because you're trying to debug it, it's package. So if you accidentally type publish instead of package, you might just release a new version up to the store. So you have to be a bit careful when you're doing that.
that's amazing. Yeah,
I definitely didn't do that once.
It's like anything else though. Like these make for great stories, right? As long as you're not like completely like destroying someone's lives or something. It's just a fun story to have after the fact. Well, Jordan Paul, this has been great. Thanks for joining us. I wish you the best of luck with this extension, because I think you are solving a really cool problem. So thanks for building it. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
having us on. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, and for everybody else, like I said, we're taking a bit of a holiday break here on the show, but make sure to tune back in the next year. We've got a pretty cool schedule of guests lined up. But until then, see everybody.
Bye.